Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jonathan Chavez, a venture associate with Capital Factory, and today we are hosting the Texas Startup Scene AMA. And today we have the pleasure of speaking with Marc Nathan. But before we get started, let's hear from the CEO and founder of Capital Factory, Joshua Bayer.
Howdy, my name is Joshua Bayer, and I'm the founder and CEO of Capital Factory. Capital Factory is the center of gravity for entrepreneurs in Texas, the #1 state for startups in the US. Thousands of entrepreneurs, programmers, and designers gather day and night, in person and online, for meetups, classes, and co-working. With boots on the ground in Austin, Dallas, and Houston, we meet the best entrepreneurs in Texas and introduce them to their first investors, employees, mentors, and customers. Capital Factory has invested in more than 300 Texas startups over the past decade. Whether physically in person or virtually online, Capital Factory is buzzing with energy and activity every day. Start with all the geekiest events on meetup.com and sprinkle in out-of-town guests, book signings, hackathons, innovation conferences, and pitch events. We're talking about thousands of participants every month. Most of the events are free, open to the public, and streamed over the internet. Capital Factory is all about community. Everyone's here to meet other people who can help them on their journey or to help others find their way. We kick off every morning with a text-based Ask Me Anything session with a mentor or investor in our Slack channel. Anyone in our community can ask questions in real time, and everyone else can see the answers. These are some of the most active investors and the most successful entrepreneurs in Texas. Those same mentors and investors do regular office hours where they volunteer a few hours a month. It's easy for any of our community members to find people with specific interests or expertise and to book a 30-minute meeting with them. With hundreds of mentors and investors in the network, there are dozens of meetings happening every day. Our co-working space provides desks, offices, conference rooms, classrooms, a podcast room, a video conferencing booths, and more. But the most important spot is the kitchen, because that's where everybody comes together. That's the real reason everyone's here, to meet each other. And every day at Capital Factory is demo day. Maybe it's the local angel investor network or a venture capitalist from out of town. Maybe it's one of the Fortune 500 scouts looking for new tech or a state or federal government official. It's delegations from other countries, school kids, army generals, and celebrities. We've helped entrepreneurs get in front of Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, and even President Obama. How do we know who to put in front of the president? Well, first, they go through an intensive interview and assessment process where they're vetted by our staff and our mentor network. We categorize them by industry and technology and score them based on traction and potential. Then, they have to work their way up to the top. On the way, they'll often meet with members of our Innovation Council of Fortune 500 scouts looking for startups with technology that can give the big companies a competitive advantage. They're hanging out in the kitchen of the co-working space and in our Slack channels online. They partner with startups to go after big government contracts with the Army Futures Command, Air Force Ventures, and the Texas Military Department. The money is flowing. In the past year, 30 startups in our community received more than $60 million in non-dilutive funding through government programs. Capital Factory is also the official Google Tech Hub for Texas. Google plugs us into a global network of other entrepreneurial communities and creates unique opportunities to help our startups attract investors, increase diversities, and access Google services. All of this activity creates exclusive deal flow and data for our investment fund. Our goal is to invest in the best deals in Texas, no matter who leads them. Over the past 10 years, we've secured $110 million in pro rata, super pro rata, and follow-on rights in more than 600 companies. We watch them all interact with our mentors, investors, Innovation Council, and each other, so we know which ones to invest in. Some of our most successful companies include Aceable, Coder, Data.World, Icon, Sensei, Storable, and WP Engine. Are you ready to quit your job and become an entrepreneur? Do you know someone who is? That's who I want to meet. And those are the kind of people who I can introduce you to. You can message me directly on Twitter at Joshua Bayer or email me at josh@quityourjob.com.
Thanks, Josh, for that overview. And as Josh mentioned, Capital Factory has a variety of resources to get plugged into the startup ecosystem here in Texas. And we host this AMA monthly to provide with all the information on those resources, as well as additional resources in and around the state. Now, before we start, I want to touch upon something that I think is very important to Capital Factory's mission here in the state of Texas, and it is the Texas Startup Manifesto. Now, for those of you who aren't aware of this, we consider it somewhat of a guiding or northern star within the company. Basically, it holds that despite the fact that if Texas was its own country, it would be in the top 15 economies in the world. Historically, the various cities and metroplexes in this state have been fairly competitive. And what we're trying to do here at Capital Factory is lay the foundation for collaboration and connectivity across the state so that every state can utilize the strengths and account for the weaknesses of others. For example, Austin is obviously known as the heart of tech when it comes to Texas. Dallas and DFW, this entire region here in North Texas, has a storied history in telecom and enterprise and even gaming and esports. Houston has historically been known for being a very industrious city built around oil and gas and manufacturing machinery, things that are very messy problems, but obviously present amazing opportunities for startups in the space. And of course, San Antonio has a strong presence of cybersecurity and the military. So because of this Northern Star, this is why you see Capital Factory's presence across the state, whether it's physical boots on the ground here in Dallas or in Houston or in Austin, whether it's utilizing resources like we have internally, like Union VC, so that despite where you may be based in the state, whether you're building in the outskirts of the suburbs of DFW or you're in the heart of Austin, you have access to all of Capital Factory's resources. And at the end of the day, all of this is built towards a goal of treating Texas basically as a super tech ecosystem. And if we can accomplish that, we truly believe that we can rival any ecosystem in the world. Heavy words, I know, but we live and breathe it every day. So with that being said, I want to introduce Marc Nathan very briefly. So for those of you who don't know, Marc is an experienced leader in the startup community and a super connector. He regularly assists companies with everything from fundraising, business strategy, investor pipeline building, structuring finance rounds, and general strategic advice, particularly as it relates to seed and early stage investing. Marc enjoys facilitating meaningful collaborations between all of the important constituents in a given ecosystem or sub-ecosystem here in Texas, whether it's the founders, the advisors, executive, and service providers. Currently, he serves as the VP of Client Strategy in Egan Nelson LLP's Emerging Technology and Venture Capital Practice Group. Prior to that, he founded T-Squared Agency, which is a boutique consulting firm that's focused on helping and supporting select clients with comprehensive funding strategies. And through T-Squared, he's launched Texas Squared Startup Newsletter, which you absolutely have to subscribe to. And it covers everything from startup news, opinions, and events that affect the entire community here in the lone startup region. Marc is also a frequent public speaker and thought leader on a number of topics relevant to everything we just discussed. He's an active board member, he's a startup advisor, and a mentor at numerous accelerators, co-working spaces, and startup technology community organizations, including but not limited to Capital Factory, Techstars, Mass Challenge, Bunker Labs, Rice Alliance for Technology and Entrepreneurship, and Houston Angel Network. So for those of you that might be new to Texas, and in case you haven't already picked up on this, you 100% need to meet this guy. So with that being said, let's meet this guy. Let's bring Marc to the stage. Hey, how's it going, Marc?
Good to see you, Jonathan. How are you?
Doing fantastic. I'm doing fantastic. We're really glad to have you today. So, with that being said, just before we start off, I do want to mention to the audience, if you have any questions, we will be having the AMA portion in approximately 15 to 20 minutes. So go ahead and start throwing your questions into the chat, and we'll bring them up when we get to that point. So,
the hard ones.
Pardon?
Throw the hard ones at me. I like the hard ones.
All of them, absolutely. He will be able to field every single one. All right, don't let me down, Marc. All right. That being said, look, moderator provided bios are great and all, Marc, but I love to hear it from the source. Maybe you can talk about some of the most meaningful opportunities or experiences you've had that have led you to where you are today.
A lot. I've had a lot of help and a lot of mentors and a lot of support for over the years working with startups. But I can tell you there's been a couple of them that I really enjoyed. I was deeply involved with them. Some of them are back in Houston. Some are here in Austin. One that really sticks out is a company that really was not it had a great exit and the outcome was really fantastic, but it was a real struggle. It was a true startup roller coaster. The company was called Nutshell Mail. It was founded by two friends back in Houston. And this is way back before really all the activity around email really got started. And ultimately, the idea was if you're working for a large company with a lot of email filters, you couldn't get your personal mail, they would send you an email digest once or twice a day that you can respond to within the scope of your compliance officers for large banks and public entities and everything else. And the idea itself was good. It wasn't great, but the founders were just fantastic. And one of the things that I really found that the skill that they learned and something that I think I helped just a little bit with, and I got to thank you when they exited, so I think it's true, is that the one thing that they really had was the ability to answer questions on the fly. And they did that during the South by Southwest pitch competition. There was a judge who wasn't really being very nice, to be quite honest, but they handled it beautifully. And I saw two guys in the audience, and they were looking at the founder, and they were kind of nodding their heads. And we had a party afterward, and the founder, a guy named Marc, who's still a good friend of mine, brought them around. And it turns out they were working for a company called Constant Contact. And about 3 weeks later, they ended up getting sold to Constant Contact and opening up their West Coast office. So Marc and Dave Lyman, the two guys that started it, I worked very closely with when I was working for the Houston Technology Center. And it was just one of those things that it's always stuck with me. This is years and years later. Both of them have gone on to successfully start and exit other companies in the past, but that one really felt the best.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Marc. So you've obviously been very active in the Texas ecosystem for many years now. Now that the spotlight is on Austin and by extension, Texas, I have to ask, do you feel any sense of vindication, especially as it pertains to all the incredible founders and businesses you've helped over the years that might have gone unnoticed?
Absolutely. That's the only thing I do is look for vindication. Ultimately, Texas has always been a shining star. Texas has always been just under the radar, not just from Silicon Valley, but also places like Boston and New York and LA. And I think that it's really been a 25-year overnight success situation where there were a lot of people way back in the go-go.com days that were screaming about how great Texas was. And we really got overshadowed in quite a few ways. But we started to see a number of corporate headquarters come here, and then some VC came here, and then some talent came here. And all of a sudden in that cauldron, we became really the shining star again. I think that Austin and Texas as a whole really is the top, the absolute pinnacle of the second tier cities right now. And I think a lot of that has to do with the foundation that a lot of people over the last, like I said, 20, 25 years have started. And really, you can't deny the fact that Josh Baer himself, who started Capital Factory in 2009, really put a cap on that. And that's why we're having this conversation today.
Absolutely. And of course, I'm biased, but 100% agree with you there, Marc. Especially as it relates to what you mentioned, it being a quote unquote 25-year overnight success. It does really seem like we're at the beginning of phase one of the virtuous cycle, if you will, and that everything that's happened and built and taking place here in the state of Texas, particularly as it relates to tech, is really starting to move in the motion and momentum is on our side. So I was going to ask if, in your opinion, obviously leading question, is this a passing fad or really an industry-wide orientation, or maybe somewhere in between?
It's definitely not a passing fad. Time will tell if this is a permanent situation, but I think it's pretty clear. All the indicators, from our infrastructure to the kinds of people we have, to the University of Texas, University of Houston, Rice University, those types of situations are bringing in more entrepreneurial mindset people. They're staying here in Texas. They have the ability to hire the right people here now. They have the ability to get funded here now. They have customers here now. A lot of cities can't claim that. So as a state, I think that we are very, very strong. I think that we're only going to get stronger. I think the next couple of years is really going to show off what we're really all about. Obviously, COVID has made a major impact on everybody, on everything across the globe. But honestly, I think Austin and Texas in general have really benefited from that. And we've accelerated the process probably by 5 to 10 years.
Agreed. It's funny you mentioned, I have literally had at least 5 conversations in the last couple of days with founders that are based out of state, but are strongly considering moving here, or have potentially seriously considered that and are already looking at apartments, leases, et cetera. In a sense, every conversation I have that starts with that, I almost feel like I'm also an ambassador for the state of Texas, right?
Absolutely. I feel the exact same way. I bet I get 2 to 4 calls a week from people coming from San Francisco, LA, and New York, checking out the Austin scene, realizing that there's absolutely no benefit for staying in those cities if they don't have to. People come here for not just the lifestyle. Obviously, that's a big draw. They come here for the weather, maybe not in the summer, but don't tell anybody that. They certainly are coming here for the opportunity, the unbridled growth, really the business freedom to do what they like and start their companies and grow their companies. So it is very clear there is a flight of people coming here from all over the world, and we're getting a huge benefit out of that.
So I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that it's very likely that a significant portion of our audience today are new to Texas or are strongly considering relocating. So besides providing them with a list of pre-approved taco and barbecue spots to check out, what do you think founders should know about the Texas scene even before relocating?
First things first, and this is super important, that two things. Number one, this is really critical. Texas is not the South. Texas is Texas. Texas is very independent. Texas is very much a for-me state. We want to make sure that we are all doing things ourselves with a little bit of support and a little bit of help from others. But you're not going to get a handout when you get here, but you're not going to need it either. That's number one. Number two, you have to realize that our Texan friendliness is actually genuine. It's very real. One of the greatest things about Austin in particular, and this is so much true in Houston and certainly Dallas and San Antonio, is that we as Texan business people really want to see you succeed. We don't have sharp elbows. We always take the meeting. We always want to see the support of other people happening. We're very, very supportive of others, and I think that's a critical aspect. So on the positive side, it's a great place to live and work and raise a family and build a business and build a startup. On the negative side, we can also be perceived as almost too nice, where we don't have enough ambition relative to some of the major exits we've seen in some of the cities we've mentioned before. But other than that, the very first thing you do when you think about Texas is think about friendly people, because that's the one resource that we'll never run out of.
Absolutely. And it's funny. I actually did grow up in the South, and I could tell you when I moved here to Texas 7 years ago, I did realize it is its own beast. It's an entirely separate, almost feels like a separate nation in some ways, with its own culture and its own norms and customs and all that. So for those community members that might be new and are already here, what should they absolutely be doing week one if they truly intend on building here?
Well, it's sort of a gimme answer because they're already doing it. They're here on the AMA. So checking out Capital Factory and all the events Capital Factory does is ground zero, and that's what you do first. The second thing you do is very clearly and very obviously join the Austin Startups Facebook group, which is, I think, 55,000 strong. It's huge, and it's growing, and it's very active, and there's a minimum of all the nonsense you see at other groups where there's people back and forth and bickering and fighting. Once again, we really are here to help each other. If you're in a particular niche, there's likely a Facebook group for you. If you're looking to just gather information, there's a couple of great newsletters. I'll plug mine right now. It's Texas Squared Startup Newsletter that goes out Sunday mornings at 8 a.m. Mason Rath with Live Oak Ventures puts out a phenomenal newsletter, his Deal Memo newsletter, that goes out not just for Austin, but also for Dallas and Houston. There's lots of great resources like Built in Austin. One of my very favorite daily reads, and something I will never miss, I will read every single word he writes, is Brett Wistrom's Austin Inno newsletter, which is absolutely phenomenal. Yeah. We've got some great blogs like Silicon Hills News by Laura Lorick. We've got some great writers here, specifically Michael Cronin from the Austin Business Journal, who puts out great content all the time. So start following these people on Twitter, on Facebook, showing up to some of the things that they're promoting, especially online, because you're just staying in your house. It's not that hard. But there's groups and organizations that really do want to help. It's pretty obvious you want to check out Meetup and see all the different founder and entrepreneurial events and things going on online. And we've got everything from e-commerce to robotics to I'm personally very interested in the CPG market right now, consumer packaged goods. There's a ton of activity in that space, but there's lots and lots of things going on. And a lot of our VCs are very open and very friendly. They'll do AMAs, they'll take office hour meetings, they'll do it often and with a lot of real passion. So like I said, there's a lot of things you can do, but there's only a handful of things you need to do to really get acclimated.
Awesome. So for those startups in the audience that might still be in the ideation phase, and I know phases can get a little fuzzy at the edges
Sure.
within the world of tech, what are some especially helpful resources that are available and that you recommend? Maybe in terms of programs or things that help in that process when they're still forming.
Absolutely. So one thing you'll learn about Austin is we really are very much a bootstrap town. We really like the idea of funding your company through customers. You're going to see that kind of theme go over and over and over again. Most people think of West Coast as very, very high growth and a lot of money. So scalability is really the key for West Coast deals. Financial stability and profit is really interesting for East Coast investors and East Coast deals. We're somewhat of a hybrid. Whereas we want rock solid businesses with traction that can actually get from the idea stage to talking to customer phase to getting early traction phase to raising money phase. So some of the specific things I would suggest, there's other organizations outside of Capital Factory. There's Founders Institute and Mass Challenge and Bunker Labs if you're a vet. And all these organizations are interlocking. The last number I heard, there are 22 separate incubator and accelerator programs in the Austin area. And that includes Techstars Austin, which just kicked off last week. So we're seeing a lot of activity in this space. We've got some really strong corporate VC and corporate accelerator programs, specifically Oracle and Intel is coming here, and a few others are showing up. But there's a flavor for everybody, and it's simply a matter of mapping out the ecosystem to find out what your niche is.
Absolutely. Now, for those startups that might be a little bit further along, think maybe post-institutional seed, get ready for Series A or beyond. Are there resources that exist for those type of startups as well?
Certainly. Like they said, those corporate VCs are very helpful. We've got offices of Boeing here. We've got a number of other organizations that have people on the ground looking at deals. And we really can't discount the Army, really. I mean, we've got a huge presence right now with the Army's Futures Command, which is based at Capital Factory's offices. And my personal belief is that the Army Futures Command is going to have as much more, if not more of an impact on Austin as a whole than Dell did even 25 years ago. So there's all kinds of different ways to get involved. There's all kinds of different people that are going to help you with resources at every phase and every stage of your company.
Yeah, it's one thing I want to tag onto there that I think is interesting. Historically, Silicon Valley's roots, are integrated in some ways with the military, and to see that dynamic play out similarly here in Austin, I think is a good indicator towards the long-term, potential for Austin, obviously, but Texas at large. So, as far as fundraising goes, do you need to be in Austin, or does it necessarily matter?
A year ago, I'd have said absolutely you need to be in Austin. Now with COVID and Zoom and all the different meetings online, the answer is no. Many of the VCs we have here, the most established VCs, I see that Live Oak is here with us today. You've got Silverton, S3, Next Coast, even ATX Venture Partners and a few others. Of the larger funds, more established local funds here, many of them have charters that say that they want you in Texas, headquartered in Texas. So it is pretty important to be here, but I don't know why you'd want to be anywhere else anyway. So it's kind of a never-ending cycle. So the answer is a qualified yes. You want to be in Texas to raise Texas money.
Now, historically, VC has been very local, right? Investors, for the most part, like investing in companies that they could physically walk to, although I don't know if that would be the case in Texas or in the summertime.
Let's call it a 100-mile rule. Most people don't want to invest outside of 100 miles of where they can get to a board meeting or having an emergency meeting within a car ride or a quick plane.
You think that factor is still at play despite the effects COVID has had on how we interact and how we work?
Somewhat. Once again, I think COVID has really thrown that rule for a loop. I think that with the advent of the adoption really of Zoom meetings and online phone calls and things like that, I think that's changed slightly. I also think the concentration of capital and talent has moved away from the coast into the Midwest and Texas and other places. So while I think that the tendency of the VCs is they want to invest close to home, I think that many VCs are seeing opportunities all across the world, and location and geography are no longer a barrier.
Awesome. Just FYI to the audience, don't forget to load up the chat with questions. We'll be starting the actual AMA portion here within the next 5 minutes or so. Marc, you spend a lot of time in Houston, obviously.
Yep.
I'd love to hear about maybe some city-specific resources that you think are especially relevant for early-stage founders that are building, not necessarily in Austin, but in cities like Houston or even Dallas.
Oh, sure. Well, I can really speak to Houston. I lived there many years. I was very involved and still am to a certain degree of the startup community there. There's organizations, and the obvious ones are the Ion Accelerator, which is opening up their facility shortly. You've got other brand new accelerators, Greentown Labs, Plug and Play Center, certainly the Cannon, which is a very, very large 3-office facility of co-working, accelerator, mentorship, and now they just bought a crowdfunding platform. They're going to be helping with early stage funding of deals. You've got organizations in Houston that are second to none. I'm very, very proud of the tech scene in Austin, in Dallas, and Houston. It's grown quite a bit. Nothing is ever going to overshadow the oil and gas business or the medical business in Houston. If you have any kind of medical deal, whether it's a device, a therapeutic, even a drug, the Texas Medical Center Accelerator Program, TMCX, is absolutely phenomenal. You've got a number of different niche organizations. Once again, there's another corporate VC accelerator program, Halliburton Labs, that's grown in Houston for the last couple of years that I'm really impressed with. You've got other ones like Unique Ventures and a few others. There's a hardware venture group there that I really think is great called Fruition Labs. I mean, I can go on, and I will if you let me, but the fact is there are lots and lots of resources for early stage companies anywhere you look, as long as you know how to look.
Absolutely. So we kind of touched upon this in your answer and even earlier in the conversation as it pertains to CPG. But are there any specific industry or verticals that you're especially keen on?
Sure.
I think you kind of mentioned a few resources, but maybe there's some others that you haven't mentioned.
Sure. Well, specific to Texas and specific to Austin, you've got consumer packaged goods. We've got a couple of organizations here. We've got a world-class accelerator, truly world-class, called SKU.is, that has had escape velocity, and now they have offices in Dallas, Minnesota, and New York. That's on the consumer packaged goods side. Another group that's very actively involved with CPG here in Austin is called naturallyaustin.org, which is essentially a trade organization of many of the emerging brands here. There's a number of other organizations, a number of other verticals. Fintech is growing like a weed here in Austin. Fintech is a very, very big deal that's a little bit under the radar. You've got robotics, aerospace, specifically rocketry. There are lots and lots of things coming here now or have been established here for the last few years that we didn't really see a few years ago. I want to take a step back and realize that Austin for the last 20, 25 years is known for two things in the software space. Number one, B2B sales, and number two, customer service. It's what we know very, very well. We've done it many times. Our executives understand the pace and the understanding of how to make those types of companies run. But these other verticals, as I mentioned, fintech, CPG, aerospace, defense, cybersecurity, we have it all here. Cybersecurity is really strong in San Antonio. They've got BuildSec. They've got the Port of San Antonio building cybersecurity incubators. It's really incredible to watch. So I think that any kind of business you have, and that, by the way, includes consumer. We don't really touch on consumer so much at Capital Factory, but it is a really big deal, and we really can show that there are companies that can achieve escape velocity, like I like to say, that get outside of the Texas market into the worldwide market. And I'm talking about both consumer tech and consumer packaged goods. They are less focused here, but we still have quite a few of them.
Absolutely. So 2 more questions before we hop into the AMA portion. The first one, and I think you might have mentioned this again, but just one more time so we can, perhaps drop it in the chat. What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Oh, easy. I'm an open book. I'm Marc, M-A-R-C 1919 everywhere on social media, LinkedIn, all that, Twitter, Facebook, Insta, you name it. That's how you get a hold of me. I'm happy to give my cell phone number because I don't mind taking calls at startup times, 713-569-3703. I take all comers. I like to talk to interesting people all day long. I have the best job in the world working for a law firm that allows me to talk to startups and investors all day. So quite frankly, it's my job to talk to new startups. And so I'm always happy to do it. And like I said, I am basically available 24 hours a day.
That's bold, putting your number out there. I love it,
I don't
Mark.
mind. Done it for years.
All right, last question. Whether it's in a personal or professional setting, what's the kindest thing that anyone's ever done for you?
Oh my gosh, it's too many to count. Quite frankly, if I had to really dial in, I would say early in my career, I had a number of people in Houston that really took me under their wing as mentors, people that I really like and respect, that really kind of set me straight, got me involved with things like the Houston Angel Network, where I was a very active member for many years. Happy to drop some names: Ben Mayberry, Richard Scruggs, Andrew Clark, a few people like that I really, really respect and like. A guy who doesn't live in Texas anymore, but I still talk to occasionally, Phil Frere, who is the head of several different major companies, who once again gave me the opportunity to help the community by kind of giving me the guiding light of how to do that. But and that's also very true here in Austin. I mean, there's way, way, way too many to count. I feel like if I drop some names here, I'll forget all of them. So I don't want to do it. I just want to say, take a look at the list of mentors at Capital Factory, and every single one of them at some level helped me.
Absolutely. And I think there's something you hit upon, Mark, that is especially relevant to what we do at Capital Factory. And it's how incredibly impactful and in some cases life-changing a single connection can be, right? A single meeting, a single chance encounter, a single text or email, anything of that sort could, completely change the trajectory of, who you are and in this context, the building or the business that you're building.
Absolutely. And I'll give you a quick story. Just last week, I had a great conversation with a very active mentor at Capital Factory, a venture capitalist by the name of Craig Cummings. Just a quick catch-up call, just, hey, how are you? What's going on with you? And that led to a number of opportunities for both of us. People like to meet each other. That's one thing that really hurts about COVID. We don't have those little tiny 2-minute updates when you run into somebody at the co-working spaces or run into them at the coffee shop. Not the setup meetings, because we can all do that. I'm talking about the guys you run into on the street just to shake their hand and say hello. That will come back eventually, but that's really what Austin's all about. And I can't tell you how many people I do that. I tend to spend most of my time going back and forth between coffee shops and Capital Factory and a few other co-working spaces, but just seeing these people and just getting a quick understanding of what they're working on or what they're seeing and what they're knowing. That's my bread and butter. I love that more than anything else. And I like being able to be the center of that kind of attention. But I really feel like every single person you run into that's out and about, especially now, is really there to help. And that's one thing I really love about Austin.
Awesome. All right. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump into the AMA portion of the conversation. Real quick, there we go. We have a question from Jason Sorrells. Are there any investors in DFW interested in elder tech, drone tech, edu-tech space, or post-revenue pre-seed and be interested in talking to anyone?
Yes and no. So elder tech is a little tougher there, but I know that there's a very big group in Houston called Health 2.0, which is essentially a trade network of people looking at the geotech space. The guy that you want to talk to for sure is a good friend of mine named Patrick Talley, who works at Golden Section Ventures and does his own things on occasion. But there's that in Dallas. Not off the top of my head, but if it's a good deal and you can make money in it, I guarantee there's people out there looking for you.
Absolutely. And then real quick, I want to say, I don't know if this is their area of expertise, but I think Green Park and Golf here in DFW has investments in this space.
Very much so. And the guy to talk to over there is an old friend of mine from Houston who's a very successful entrepreneur, Dan Parsley. So if you can't get to anybody at Green Golf and Park, then look up Dan and he'll find you, or you'll find him, and maybe that conversation will get started that way.
Awesome. All right, next question from Josh Levin. Any advice for connecting into the fintech world here in Austin?
So yes and no. Josh, I will tell you that there are a lot of fintech companies here. We've got some really big ones like Dosh and a few others. We've got companies coming here all the time. We actually have companies that are starting here all the time. There's a few that are at Capital Factory already, but connecting, probably look up, there's a podcast, and it's run by the guy that runs FinServe Marketing. And FinServe does a podcast about the fintech space here in Austin, and that's probably what I'd look up first.
Awesome. We have a question here that was sent in just prior to the start of this event. I'll go ahead and read it out to you. How do you see the Texas innovation ecosystem evolving in the next 20 years with regards to education, diversity, specialization, and impact? And there's a secondary question here that's also, what are the key drivers that are needed to provide a sustainable, impactful, and diverse ecosystem for future generations?
Great question. So Texas is very aware of its diversity issues around early stage startups. I'm not one to talk, obviously, but one of the things that we can really focus on right now is diversity of boards, diversity of finances, diversity of investments themselves. And I think that Texas is, once again, very aware of them, and therefore they're making very clear strides to change what has traditionally been a very all-white, very all-male situation. Capital Factory itself has done a phenomenal job of funding and supporting people of color and startups that don't have traditionally overrepresented entities. And I think that that's only going to accelerate in Texas across the board. Houston happens to be the most diverse large city in the United States. It's only going to get more diverse from there. Most cities are going to look like Texas in the next 50 years. That's what all the reports say. So I think diversity is almost inevitable. So that's number one. Number two, I think that it's really important, and we can talk about the second part of that question, which is the key drivers. The key drivers are diversity wins. Diversity counts. It matters. It makes better investments. It makes more robust ecosystems. And I think that there's a lot of support behind it. I personally support quite a bit of it as an ally. And the fact is that the days of the lily white board and the lily white C-suite are over. And they're over now. They're only going to get more over in the future. But that's not even the issue. We're seeing a lot of early stage funds specifically for women. And they call it, I love this, gender diverse. We've got a fund here called True Wealth Ventures. Beam Network just opened up as an angel group. Artemis down in Houston is doing great things, and I really like what they're doing. Even RevTech actually has a female focus on their fund right now through Rachel West. And I feel like we're starting to see more and more of that, and it's really important. We had a former Texan and somebody who's very close to the ecosystem here at Capital Factory, Dr. Brittany Barreto, who's funding a Fintech fund called Fintech Focus. Those are the kinds of activities that are really going to see the growth and the diversity happen here in Texas, probably before most other states.
Thanks for that incredibly comprehensive answer, Mark. I'm sure a lot of people in the audience appreciate it. I certainly do. So we have a fun question from Lucas Paper. New to Austin and wondering, what would you recommend to see, do, experience to truly get a feel for what makes Austin weird?
Oh, Lucas, this is a hard one because one of the biggest problems with Austin right now, it's not from you moving here. I'm glad you're here. Congratulations for making the right choice and coming here. Keeping Austin weird is getting harder and harder because we have so many people building so many different things that we're starting to see some gentrification. The obvious thing is go see a live show. It's very clear. Once, obviously, COVID is over, clearly. Show up and go to South by Southwest when it's actually open. This year is going to be hybrid, mostly online. It's still going to be fun, but it's definitely going to be different. Figure out which is your favorite taco. There's not a choice that you like tacos. It's just which one you like. Pick your best barbecue place. Go see some art. Walk the trails. Go walk down Lady Bird Lake and see the statues and see the people and see all that. But really participate. Show up. I think that really show you that Austin has some really interesting pockets. One thing I will tell you about Austin that I noticed personally, and I think this is important for the audience here, is that Austin doesn't really broadcast what's going on. You kind of have to hear everything word of mouth, and it makes it easier to find friends and easier to find your tribe, but it does take a little bit of getting used to. It takes a little bit of time, especially now and nobody's going out, to really understand what's out there. But see a show, go to a comedy club, do something that is something that you wouldn't normally do, but you will see pockets of weirdness, especially on the Austin's east side and east downtown. Not that I recommend it, but that's where the weirdness really concentrates. But people are great all across the city. They are full of stories. We really like it, and it's not that hard to find if you really know where to look. I guess it's the best way to say it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Mark. So I think we might have time for maybe one or two more questions.
Great.
I'll ask another one that came through, prior to the start of the call. And And that question is, how can I get connected with startups for employment opportunities? That's a good one.
Great question. In the last, I would say 3 or 4 months, we've had a number of different job boards come online. All of the major VCs have their own job boards for portfolio companies. Capital Factory's job board is going to come online any day now. It's going to be really big for all the portfolio companies inside of Capital Factory. The single best place to go is Austin Digital Jobs Facebook group that's run by Lonnie Rosales. It's 70,000 people strong. It's super active. They want to see you succeed, as I said. They want to see you get a right job. I also like the Built in Austin job board. I recommend that one a lot. And a lot of people forget this. Indeed.com is based right here in Austin, and going on Indeed and searching for the type of job you're looking for, the salary you're looking for, that's usually very helpful. And don't count out Indeed itself as an employer.
Excellent. And I think we have one more from Sean. For startup with a limited budget looking for office workspace, where do you recommend looking?
Now, that's a softball if I've ever heard one. That's an easy one. So, Sean, I think you're in the real estate business yourself, so I'll tell you that co-working is really where it's at. Obviously, you start with Capital Factory. That's a no-brainer. That doesn't even really warrant a question or an answer. But Capital Factory is a great place to plant yourself while you get acclimated to Austin. There's a bunch of other great co-working spaces. Frankly, because of COVID and everything else, commercial real estate is really tough right now. Not a bad thing to work with a mask on outside at some of our great coffee shops like Mozart's and Houndstooth and Halcyon, and really get a feel for what the different parts of the city are. But, not just because I'm sitting here on a Capital Factory AMA, but Capital Factory really is a center of entrepreneurship. Start with that and then go from there.
Awesome. All right. I lied. There actually is one last question.
Always an extra with you. I like it. Go ahead.
All right, Carson, from a VC perspective, if a startup had press coverage, would that make that startup more interesting to you for investing?
Of course. That's an easy yes. Press is really important because what it really does, it's not so much the VC is interested in you, it's they're becoming aware of you. If you get press, it really does prove your credibility. And if you have credibility, that's one large step that it takes for an investor to give you an answer that you want. So getting press that's real, not illegitimate press. If you're putting out a press release every time you hire somebody or every time you land a customer, if you have too much press, it can get a little wishy-washy. But if you have a legitimate journalist writing about you and getting excited about you, that obviously lends to your credibility and obviously lends to the momentum of somebody writing a check for you.
Awesome. Well, I think
last question.
No, I won't get you with it this time. So, with that being said, I want to say thank you so much for spending, time out of your day to speak with us. I can only imagine how insightful all of that was for our audience members. I'm sure everyone's already subscribing to all the newsletters, figuring out when they can get in, some time to get tacos at the number of spots you mentioned. And of course, utilize all of the resources that Texas as a state and, as the individual cities has. So, again, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. And we definitely look forward to the next time that we get to talk.
Well, I certainly appreciate you having me and inviting me. And I want to thank the audience for showing up today. If I can be helpful in any way, that's sort of what I do and what I'm known for and what I want to be known for. So I want to do that. I can't thank Capital Factory enough. I've been a mentor at Capital Factory since the day they opened in 2009. I was one of the first 20 mentors. And that really did inform a lot of the reasons why I moved to Austin in the first place. It's a great organization, great resources. It's really helped me tremendously. I hope it helps you. And if I can be anywhere of service to you, please let me know.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Marc.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.